Hi, Frank. Hi, Frank. Whoa. Yeah. Good evening. We'll start the board meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, there were no actions taken in closed session. No items considered in closed session for action. Open session brings us to C4, statements of abstention. Seeing none, we'll go to adjustments to the agenda. None of those either. Board member requests for information. I actually have one request, and that is that I'd like to see a breakdown of the student body at Ridgeway in terms of their homeschool, provided just as maybe a G item to the agenda. Thank you. C7, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting held May 9th, 2018.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Director Carl, second by Director Christoph. Roll call vote, please.
Director Carl?
Aye.
Director Christoph?
Aye.
Director Fong?
Aye.
Director Pugh?
Aye.
Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Sheffield? President Close?
Aye. Okay, minutes are approved, and that brings us to C8, special presentation for our student board member, and that's me. Okay. It is with great pleasure to acknowledge the contributions made by Luke Mott, our 2017-2018 student board member. This was easier at the podium, sorry. But first, let's talk about all the things Luke does when he is not wearing his school board hat, because this is one hardworking, well-rounded guy. In addition to serving on the school board, Luke is an active member of the Maria Carrillo Band and Choir. He is also president of the Maria Carrillo Junior State of America Club, where he plans weekly debates, organizes fundraisers, coordinates logistics of taking club members to 2 conventions each year. In addition to those extracurricular activities, Luke has served as an intern for Congressman Mike Thompson. He has worked in the past 3 summers as a camp counselor at Camp Watom, where he plans activities for students and creates a safe space for them. Academically, Luke is a stellar student, takes a 7-period day, including lots of AP classes. He takes courses at the JC to accelerate his academics, where he does consistently well and is currently maintaining a weighted GPA of 4.36. Yes. In the fall, Luke plans to attend the University of California, Berkeley, and to major in either political science, economics, or business. As a board member, Luke went out of his way to bring students together across the district, learn their concerns, and elevate their voices. At board meetings, Luke provided your perspective on important, complicated, and sometimes contentious issues. His statements were always well-researched, thoughtful, and equity-minded. Most memorable to me were Luke's comments about student protests around school shootings and the A through G policy, both controversial issues. And I was most impressed when Luke, in response to our policy positions that students stay in school rather than walk out and protest related to school violence, he looked down the dais at the rest of the colleagues and said, "I disagree. It's important that students walk out." So most of all tonight, I want to celebrate Luke the citizen. Luke the guy who does democracy rather than rely on it. Luke the young man that I am confident will always use whatever position, privilege, and microphone he has to speak his mind on important issues. So thank you, Luke, for your dedicated and courageous service on our board, and best wishes for what I'm sure will be a bright future.
We should all take a picture with him. Let's take a picture. Yes, come on, come on, come on.
Now we'll take this opportunity to announce Luke's replacement for next year, 1819, Alana Mackin. Did I say that right? Come on.
So while the president is walking back, vice president can lean forward. I can tell you that as we walked into the meeting this evening, I talked to Luke for just a second, and I'll share with you what I told him. I've been on this board for 20 years. Some think that's too long. But as a result of that, I've seen a lot of student board members go through. And we've had some really diligent folks, and we've had other folks that, and I think it's been difficult. This is an incredibly difficult setting, and sometimes it's hard to deal with. This is the best student board member we've had. His comments were persuasive, cogent, important, worth thinking about, and he was, I think, the reason this policy was put in place is to get somebody like Luke on the board. So we have been very well served.
I think that's the thing that I like least about being board president is that I had to move my seat from right next to the student board member. It's always interesting to get their perspective. Okay, so that brings us to C9, special presentation, retirees. Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much, President Close. Two bad things, I have to follow that. And there's no podium for me to hide behind, so you got to see the majority of me here as I do this presentation. Are there some retirees here? Did you want to come tonight? Who's one of our retirees? I did receive some emails asking if it was a requirement. One proudly stated that they had never gone to a board meeting and they were going to keep it that way. But I did encourage them to come when we recognize in more of a social gathering next Wednesday at Legends. So on behalf of Santa Rosa City Schools, I'd like to welcome those who may be watching at home to honor our laudable retirees. Today we pay tribute to 53 individuals who contributed 1,174.5 combined years of expertise, passion, and time to Santa Rosa City Schools districts. My math, which I was a history teacher, so you could fact check it. My math shows that these 53 folks averaged 22 years of service in our district and served 68,640 students during their time. I know that their impact on the lives of our students and colleagues and community will be felt for generations, because I've been able to, in my current role, see people who I had as a teacher retire, who had the misfortune, perhaps, of having me as a student not too long ago, or long ago. It was with profound respect and sincerity that I say, as a district, we say thank you. And if you come across any of those folks, give them a hug, tell them thank you for making Santa Rosa City Schools a great place for kids and for teachers and staff, and let them know that every day will be Saturday, and not to expect anything in the mail in August. So thank you for those that are listening, and thank you so much for your time.
Okay, that brings us to C10, public comment on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us on issues that are not on the agenda. Remember that we have a new policy where all statements need to be made from the top podiums. And if you want to pull a blue card and speak, you need to come down this stairwell right there and put your blue card in the basket at the bottom of the railing. Please remember that we can't take any action or comment on the things that you present to us tonight, and that if your comments relate to a staff member, we ask you to make those privately to Assistant Superintendent Lee so that we can follow appropriate protocol. Okay, with that, I will bring up Angela Amonte. You can correct me when you get up there. After that is, you guys are really making me work hard today. Tegan Coleman? I'm not sure. Angela, Tegan, and then Talia.
Hang on, we don't have.
Hold on one second, the microphone isn't on. We won't start your time yet. You're on.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Angela Amontidi, and I attend Maria Carrillo High School. Detention is defined as the supervised retention of students beyond class time. A detention can be given when a student violates school rules or citywide discipline codes. For many schools, detention is a regular thing, and students serve them during lunch or after school. I propose that we as a district allow detention to benefit schools. During detentions, students should make up for their wrongful acts by doing something positive. Examples of this include picking up trash, sweeping classrooms, or help beautifying the campus. This is a brilliant consequence and perfectly legal and do not go against any child labor laws. If we as a district enforce this, not only will our campuses look better, but janitors will be able to use their time and focus on doing more serious issues, such as fixing the campus classrooms and bathrooms. Enforcing minor physical labor as a consequence will motivate schools to take detention more seriously, teach them hard work ethic, and overall help students and decrease student detentions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tegan, and then Talia, and then Nicole.
Good evening. My name is Tegan Coleman.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I go to Maria Carrillo High School. I'm the junior class president, and I care a great deal about Maria Carrillo and its student body. I feel that by giving students the opportunity to have a new way to be involved in our campus, it would positively benefit our students and teachers. Recently, we had a day called Mulch Madness, where the students were given the opportunity for extra credit to come out and beautify our campus by sweeping and planting new trees and such of that, and putting down mulch. The students' body enjoyed giving back to the campus and our community. Also, by implementing the program that Angela talked about, we could teach the students basic cleaning, and they could learn to respect our campus and our community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Talia Liano, great writing. Thank you. Followed by Nicole Kaufman.
Okay. Hello, my name is Talia Liano, and I'm a junior at Maria Carrillo High School. Today, I will be advocating for making Maria Carrillo High School an open campus instead of a closed one. I believe this change should be made because a vast majority of students already leave our campus on a day-to-day basis because there's simply not enough administrators to regulate the leaving and going of our students. Therefore, if we were to make it an open campus, it would decrease the reckless driving that is happening every day because of students trying to avoid getting caught. And another reason is because some may say that a closed campus makes it easier to watch over the student population, but this is simply not true because since the administration have not been able to catch every student that is leaving, if they were to make it an open campus, they could implement a regulative system that could have kids sign out and sign in when they come and go on campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole Kaufman, followed by Tristan Candelaria.
Hi, my name is Nicole Kaufman. I'm a junior at Maria Carrillo High School. I would like to address that mental health is just as important as physical health. Therefore, a mental health class should be a requirement in order to graduate high school. Although physical education allows students to become more fit in the short run, what does it really do in the long run? It may be difficult to add because some students can barely meet the graduation requirement already. However, a mental health class can replace 1 year of physical education, which can be beneficial for students, especially in high school, to learn how significant it really is. Not only is it more useful than physical education, it is possible that it can create a more positive environment. High school students in particular tend to suffer from anxiety, stress, and depression. This affects their ability to do well on tests and other responsibilities, which also affects their work ethic. Therefore, there should be both a physical and mental health class in order to graduate high school because they're just as important. Thank you.
Thank you. Tristan Candelaria, followed by someone whose first name I cannot read, but I believe the last name is Hendel. Tristan.
Hello, I'm Tristan Candelaria. I'm a junior at Maria Carrillo High School. I would like to talk about the often acknowledged but rarely acted on topic of admin and student relations. I'm thinking back to the day of dialogue where there was a course called Campus Climate where we voted on certain issues, how we felt about the campus. One of them was, I feel connected to the administrators at my school. And I have to say apologetically that it was unanimously voted that nobody could connect, including myself. I'm sorry. I feel like a lot of the time students feel hostile against the admins, and someone might say that this is inevitable because a lot of their job involves catching bad kids and disciplining them. However, a lot of the people, including myself, that have felt this way aren't really the type that get in trouble and do stuff, as I have noticed, both in conversations and online and on the day of dialogue itself. I propose with disciplinary issues, I think that they should be beyond like solving the immediately problem. I think that it should be focused on helping the kids change rather than solving each case-by-case basis. I feel like specifically with problems between students themselves, I feel like more than just certain little punishments or talking tos wouldn't solve these issues, and so that the hostility would decrease among students and between students and admin. I feel like there should be more time to interact with admin, like a specific, instead of them staying separate, and so that the only impressions that students get about admin are scary ones. I'm sorry that this was not a more organized speech and that I don't sound very concrete, but I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. And then someone Handel.
Good evening, Santa Rosa City School Board Council. I am Ariel Hendel. My position is at Maria Carrillo High School as a freshman. I invite you to think and question what I have come here to speak about today. Think of the unintended consequences that arise before you make a decision. As someone with the responsibility to manage others and an organization, the changes you make have a large effect on the people and environment you are responsible for. That means whatever decision you make will either have a positive or negative effect on others. It is critical to analyze the changes you want to make to see if this change will change something for the better or if it will cause more problems than were already before. At my high school, the decision to close down some of the bathrooms was made. The intention was to prevent kids from vaping in the bathrooms. There would be less bathrooms to monitor and less unsupervised areas for kids to vape. Once this change was put into place, bathroom lines, complaints, vaping in class or other areas of the school, and overall problems doubled. The school got many complaints from students that lines were excessively long, causing kids to be late to class, having to give up their break, and uncomfortableness. Kids would have to wait more than 5 minutes to get to a bathroom stall. Sometimes lines would be so long that it would take up most of our 15-minute break. Lines were already long enough before bathrooms were closed. There was no way that in a 5-minute break, in a 5-minute passing period, you can go to the bathroom, locker, and get to class on time. Less bathrooms made it all more impossible to be on time. Missing class takes away from our education, something you should be preserving. Also, I have personally witnessed the increase in students vaping in class without the teacher's knowledge. It is a worse place to be vaping in class than in bathrooms. This lack in bathroom availability has not stopped vaping on campus. It has pushed vaping into other areas of the school. Closing down bathrooms is not going to stop kids from vaping. This is one of many examples, another being the 8th through jury requirement change that has unintended consequences. The bathroom change has affected the kids who are vaping in school in a negative way, along with the innocent students. The intention was to negatively affect vapors, not the whole student body. Today, I have come to ask the school board and other members of the educational system to think of the unintended consequences that their decisions may result in and how it affects their schools. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Hey, before you guys leave, we don't often get a number of students coming and giving us information, especially on several different issues, which is interesting and helpful. And all of you guys obviously came from Maria Carrillo High School. So is this because of a class that you took, or what caused you all to come and give us all this interesting info?
We are all members of the Maria Carrillo High School's oral interpretation class by Ms. Mansell, who's also the mayor of Healdsburg. So, yeah.
Thank you. Good explanation. And obviously, you guys are all passing your class with flying colors.
Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to reports. CSEA report. Is President Afonso here? Nope. Santa Rosa Teachers Association report. No report tonight. Labor management, excuse me? It's gonna be, we'll see, you never know. We'll work on it. Labor management collaborative report.
I do have just but now I have extra time, so I should speak for as long as possible.
You're gonna take all 9 minutes or so?
No, we did have a meeting last week in which where we continued to look at the LCAP. The biggest things coming out of this is the realization of the group still needs to kind of work on our systems so that we can not be where we are at the end of the year having these conversations about LCAP and concerns around LCAP, but actually start building it into what we do as a committee on a monthly basis. And members will be attending the California Labor Management Institute in San Diego next month. So thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent.
Good evening to everybody. I would like to also say something about the Labor Management Collaborative. I greatly appreciate the way in which we dialogued that day around the LCAP. I'm extremely appreciative of the CSEA members who attended, as well as the SRTA members, and they happen to be sitting right there. So Catherine and Margie and Tara Lyon for SRTA. Tawny wasn't able to attend, nor was Will. It was really refreshing, and I think a look into the future of how we are going to work together and provide information for each other such that the LCAP will be something that we can all work towards and understand and meet the goals of. So tonight is your lucky night. The last meeting in May is when my obligation in terms of my contract is to present a review of the year. This is my interpretation of the review of the year, the highlights that I picked out, because you could be here for a number of hours if I did this for everything. But I assure you, I have got it narrowed down to about 9 minutes. I hope that you will see that we've accomplished many things in Santa Rosa City Schools this year in some tremendously difficult times, and I think we should all be proud of that. So I pray this works, and I turn it over to Mr. Edson to... Here in Santa Rosa, the 2017-18 school year delivered its share of challenges, but also provided many opportunities. The challenges were daunting, from the October fires to the budget reductions, our aging facilities, contract negotiations, by trustee area elections, and the continuing gap in our student outcomes. And there were challenges that came from outside our district boundaries, such as gun violence in schools, the uncertainty of the DREAM Act and DACA, the national political climate, and the economy, challenges which affected many of our students and staff. Santa Rosa City Schools is unique in many ways. It is made up of an elementary and a high school district governed by one board and one superintendent and one budget. On that budget rests the fiscal stability of 9 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, 5 high schools, 1 continuation high school, 4 dependent charter schools, and 1 independent charter school. There's no denying that the Santa Rosa City Schools budget is complicated. When I took over as superintendent on February 1st, 2016, our budget had a large structural deficit and a qualified certification by the Sonoma County Office of Education, meaning the district might not be able to meet its financial obligations for the current year or 2 subsequent years. The state of our budget created the opportunity to open the process of budgeting through numerous special board and community meetings and the development of a budget advisory committee. We reduced our budget more than $11 million in the past 2 years. Next year, we need to reduce our budget by $1.8 million. This is much less than the anticipated $5 million of reductions. The Budget Advisory Committee has been an important part of this more transparent process. In a time when we needed to reduce our structural deficit, we also needed to repair and replace our aging facilities. The community provided us the opportunity to begin that process through the passage of bond measures I and L for a combined $229 million. Completion of our technology infrastructure upgrade project is expected in August. This project has provided new network cabling, new network equipment, including wireless access points across all campuses, a new phone system, and an integrated bell, clock, speaker solution. With more than $1 billion in needed roof repair and maintenance, we have completed roof and HVAC upgrades at Biella and Hidden Valley Elementaries, Piner High, and the Slater Gymnasium. The roofing HVAC projects slated for this summer are Comstock Middle, Monroe Elementary, Elsie Allen and Maria Carrillo High Schools, and the first phase of Santa Rosa High School. Another project slated for this summer is the long-awaited classroom door lock installation. The board approved moving forward with installing classroom security door locks. The lock assessment has been completed and bidding documents are being completed for installation starting this summer. Another challenge was contract negotiations with teachers, which continued into the 2017-18 school year with a state-appointed fact finder. A tentative agreement was reached and ratified that provides a total of 2.5% over 2 years on the salary schedule and $1,400 in benefits for 2018 and another $1,400 in 2019. Although not part of the negotiations, I am pleased that we were able to provide married couples who both teach in our district health benefits for both spouses. The Labor Management Collaborative, or LMC, has provided the opportunity for both unions and management to focus on regular communication and collaboration. Communication and collaboration were never more crucial with the challenge of the wildfires. In the early morning of October 9th, wind-fueled wildfires cut a path from Calistoga through Santa Rosa, and eventually the Tubbs fire that hit our city would be named the most destructive wildfire in California history. 36,807 acres burned, 5,463 structures lost, and 22 deaths. We lost the Hidden Valley Satellite School and the structures and equipment at the Santa Rosa High School farm on Alba Lane. School was closed for 3 weeks while the fire was contained. Water and electricity were restored, and in order to professionally clean ash, smoke, and debris from school sites and test each site for safety. More than 2 million square feet of school facilities were cleaned, over 3,000 air filters were changed, and 200 professional cleaners worked 24 hours a day. All of our 16,000 students and their families were affected in some way by the wildfires, and many had devastating losses. 800 of our students and 80 staff members lost their homes. Leading Santa Rosa City Schools through the crisis of the fires and the extended recovery has been the most difficult work I've encountered in my career. There is no emergency plan or playbook that prepares for this type of disaster. I can also say it is the greatest opportunity I have had in my career. To care for the well-being of all of our students and staff is an honor. We opened Elsie Allen High and Cook Middle School as evacuation shelters by 8 a.m. the first morning of the fires. The network of community partners was a lifeline for our district and vice versa as we worked to evacuate and recover from the fires. Our entire staff are to be commended as they found their own safety and waited for the all call to return to school to be the second responders for all of our students. The community has supported the recovery of Santa Rosa City Schools with substantial donations to create an integrated wellness center and rebuild the Santa Rosa High School farm at Alba Lane. The importance of a strong governance team has been demonstrated throughout the wildfires and recovery process, and also when making important decisions about board elections. In 2015, the Board of Education requested a demographic study be conducted to determine if the voting patterns demonstrated a need to move from at-large district elections to by trustee area elections. On February 28, 2018, the Board of Education selected a map with 7 trustee areas. For each trustee area, there will be representation of 1 board member. 2 of the 3 seats coming up for election in November of 2018 will be on the west side of the city. The remaining 4 seats will be up for election in 2020. Election to a seat on the board is a tremendous responsibility to all of the students in our district. When student outcomes continue to be disparate, the board and I must look at the policies that may be perpetuating the disparities. When we look at our Latino students, who make up half of our student population, there is a significant gap in graduation rates and A through G requirement completion. The LCFF and the LCAP have helped shine a light on our student outcome gaps. To help illuminate these gaps was a change to Illuminate Education, our new student information system. I greatly appreciate the committee of teachers, classified staff, and administrators who went through the process of selecting Illuminate Education 2 years ago. I am also thankful for the patience of parents and staff during the transition from eSchools to Illuminate Education this year. Parents are ready for teachers to use Illuminate for student progress and grades. They are hungry for that connection between home and school. Curriculum development based on the Common Core and Next Generation Science Standards by teachers for teachers is another opportunity to close the access gap for underserved students. Equity and social justice training with cultural competency workshops at the Museum of Tolerance and with unconscious bias training by CTA is an opportunity for staff to understand why access is so important for all students. The actions and services of the LCAP, along with having better attendance systems in place, have led to an improvement of nearly 1% in average daily attendance across all schools and a 2% reduction in chronic absenteeism at our secondary schools. Attending schools equals more opportunity to learn. The Board of Education continues to fulfill the strategic plan goals and values they developed 5 years ago. One of these goals is about serving all students fairly, justly, and equitably. 5 years in the making, and the Board of Education passed a new graduation policy beginning with the class of 2021. The intent of the graduation policy is to provide access for all students to the Common Core standards, college prep classes, and career technical education. College preparation and career technical education is not an either-or. It is an and. CTE, Visual and Performing Arts, Sports, FFA, make the core subject areas more meaningful and bring learning to life. Until we can no longer predict student outcomes by ethnicity, language, and socioeconomic status, we have important work to do together. As your superintendent, I will continue to lead our district through any challenges that may arise and provide the leadership to turn them into opportunities. Together, we can assure students that being made in Santa Rosa is something to be proud of. Yeah, thank you. I did make a mistake on 2021. It should be 2022, so I provide that disclaimer. Thank you.
Thank you for that great report. I have no report tonight. Board member reports. Director Sheffield?
That really was a nice presentation, Diane. Thank you. Just something real brief is I did visit at Biela Elementary School, a nice site visit and meeting with Principal Diaz, toured some of the classrooms, the school garden, which is very impressive, the Kinder Academy, and the Family Engagement Center. And a big shout out to Michelle Morales, the Family Engagement Facilitator. This really is an important resource, and you get the sense the moment that you walk in and you see families that are using the center and how they're using the center, and it just promotes family involvement at the schools. And lastly, I just want to say is our last meeting before the end of the year, for parents and families and students to take advantage of every learning opportunity over the summer, especially young kids, reading programs, the reading programs throughout the community, and just the importance of keeping our young minds active through the summer. That's all I have to report.
Thank you. Director Anderson?
Nice. I'd like to speak more generally for the on behalf of the parents in our district, and this is a whirlwind time, and especially for the senior parents. And I want to thank, on behalf of all the parents, all the site personnel, the teachers, the coaches, everybody who puts together these annual events in such a way that they feel like those once-in-a-lifetime moments that they are for our families, and it really means a lot to us.
Thank you. Director Pugh?
Well, not with our schools, but in general, it's been a busy week. We had the Board of Directors meeting for California School Board Association, as well as our delegate assembly. And today I had the opportunity to show around our executive director from the National Board, Sacramento. And so, and he'll be back also to visit this coming Thursday as well.
Great.
Pass.
Director Fong?
If your child is in the arts, takes the arts, is in the performing arts, visual arts. I just want to give a shout out to the staff, the adults, the parents, and the kids who participated in the Rose Parade. It was phenomenal. We were well represented. I think almost every school had a contingent of something, music or marching or cheer or something, and I was so proud to watch Santa Rosa City Schools just come down contingent after contingent with a lot of smiles. And I think if I had to give an award, my own personal Fong Award, in terms of numbers of participants, it would be Cesar Chavez Language Academy, who just filled up an entire block. I think they had their entire school there dressed up in their t-shirts that one of the kids made. So thank you so much to the teachers who give so much time and who take time out and practice, and the parents who go and support, and the kids for being there. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Director Christoff.
Just a couple of things. I did attend the Polenta Feed, which is one of the annual fundraisers for Santa Rosa High School. And again, very successful, and a model foundation that I would like to see replicated. It's not that easy, but so many people, such a rich history and tradition in the school. Of course, it's the longest standing high school in the district. But the community that's there, reconnecting with people that I knew in elementary school, reconnecting with people I haven't seen for many years, the integration of teachers and staff and former students, it's a wonderful event. I did speak with one of the founders of the foundation in a separate meeting to talk about how we could possibly do this with some of our other schools. I know Montgomery's got a very successful foundation. Piner's well on its way. Elsie has good support as well. But I would love to see this concept transferred or moved into the middle school areas as well. I really do think that we can do a lot with those activities. The scholarships alone that Santa Rosa High School give out is absolutely incredible to me. So anyway, I appreciate all the work that's there, and I know others are doing good work in our other schools as well. But anyway, a very well attended and well received event. I also wanted to mention a very good conversation with Principal Albavera at Ridgeway Continuation School, and we spent probably an hour talking about the school and his promotion to Elsie Allen. Very happy for him. But what is very incredible to me is how successful this school has been and how popular it is with the students, and how much the teachers at that school believe in that school. So I think we have a real gem in our midst among our other schools as well. So I'll stop there for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Board Member Luke Mott.
Thank you. This is my last report to this board as student representative. I would like to start by thanking everybody up here and just saying that I'm so grateful for the opportunity that I've had to be one of the student representatives to the school board this year. And I say one of because I truly believe that all the students who've spoken before me tonight and all the students who've spoken at the other board meetings this year are also student representatives. And I have a strong belief that students in this district really do have the power to make change and influence policy if they want to, if they come here in numbers like they have throughout the school year, and I'm sure we'll continue to in the future. Absolutely, students have the power to make change, and I think that's wonderful that we live in a country, in a state, in a school district where that is possible. So that's just great. I would like to say that I'm hopeful, extremely hopeful for the future of this school district. It feels like this year, I know that it's my only year I've been on the board, but I can't help but feel like it's been kind of a rebirth of and a big turning point in this school district's history. You talked within the last few years, you talked about how we were in a budget deficit, the fires hit us, it looked like we had a really bad hand dealt to us, and we just totally turned it around. I think we made a lot of progress in a lot of areas with teacher contracts, with our budget crisis, overcoming the fires, and honestly, if this school district and community can overcome what we've gone through this year, I think we can overcome just about any challenge that can get thrown at us. And now, As this is my last board report, there's a few issues that I'd like to bring to the board, and maybe next year we can work on these with Alana or anybody like that. So first of all, I just want to talk about PE credits and how those work. I want to make sure that all students have an easy path to graduation, and I know that the added A through G requirements are going to make it harder for some students to achieve that goal of graduation. I think that one way we can alleviate some of this problem we might face next year is to change the way we're looking at PE credits. I have a couple questions. Why do dance students need to choose between taking PE their freshman year and taking their elective? In the past, we've had dance count for PE. I think it worked great, and there's been a change. Can we look at that as possibly one way to help the A through G requirement burden be eased? And also, what about PE credits that count for sports? I know that one of my colleagues talked at the last board meeting about he took a sport his freshman and sophomore year, junior year took PE, and then had to take another PE course his senior year because those two semesters didn't count due to the fact that you need to take a year of PE before taking your sports as PE. Can we change that? I think those are some avenues, and we can look at other ways PE credit and the way we look at that could be changed going forward. Also, the dress code has been an issue that since the start of my term as student representative has been brought up repeatedly. And I think the main thing that I want to talk about on this is that a gender-neutral dress code and gender-neutral language in our policies district-wide is really crucial in making sure that every student has the same opportunity in our district to succeed. I want to make sure that my sister, who's going into high school next year, isn't afraid maybe this outfit I wore yesterday, next week I'm going to get dress coded, have to change, be embarrassed in front of my friends. I want to make sure that we really have a clear policy set up, whatever that policy may be, that it's gender neutral and that it's enforced the same way at every student, at every school site, regardless of any other factor. And I just want to thank, again, the whole board, everybody, the community, for this amazing opportunity. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, board member. It's been a pleasure. All right, Frank or Ron, do you have additional CSBA or NSBA reports?
I passed.
I just wanted to mention, Frank and I were at the Delegate Assembly this last weekend in Sacramento for CSBA, California School Boards Association, and two of the breakout workshops were very interesting for me. It was a part of the process. It's a very interesting, group of people, and we set policy for the organization as a part of what we do during these conferences. But one of the issues, breakout issues that CSBA is trying to develop policy for is marijuana and the legalization of it. And I hadn't thought much about it, but being around some very thoughtful people from all over the state, it's obvious that we're going to have some more conversations about it. CSBA is struggling with the idea of developing policy or templates to help local school boards with this. And for me, it's all of a sudden my eyes were open, so it might be something we want to have a discussion as a board sometime. The other one, close to everybody's heart, especially after the horrible incident in Santa Fe, Texas last week, was the idea of safety. And I had the good fortune of being in a group, breakout group, where there were a couple of law enforcement people as board members, a couple of security people, and some very thoughtful, experienced people. There were about 30 of us in the room. And it was like it really opened my eyes to the fact that I don't know much about security, and that people think that they have it figured out. It's pretty interesting to hear these people who are real experts talk. CSBA is struggling with this. I know we have had conversations about it. And I think one of the things that I would suggest that we do as a board is the Leadership Institute this summer is going to have a workshop on security. So I have asked that I be a part of that, and I think my other fellow board members, if you're here in July, if you'd like to be a part of that, I think that would help our district quite a bit. But anyway, it's a big issue, a lot more complex than I had thought it was going to be, and I thank CSBA for moving forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Christoph. Okay, brings us to the consent agenda.
Move approval of 2 through 11.
Second.
Moved by Director Carl, second by Director Pugh. Roll call vote, please, Lori.
Director Carl?
Aye.
Director Pugh?
Aye.
Director Christoph?
Aye.
Director Fong? Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Sheffield? President Close?
Aye.
Student Board Member?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries and brings us to our F items, starting with F1, discussion item on football 2020.
You guys have an private on there?
All right, good evening, President Close, Superintendent Kitamura, members of the board. Tonight, you'll be hearing a presentation from Coordinator Evans on football 2020 and the findings from the committee. And with that, I'll turn it over to Coordinator Evans and she can introduce her guests.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to provide the presentation, and then the members of the committee that are here with me will be available to answer questions, or if our other members of the panel. So if you're part of the panel, would you stand up, or part of the committee, would you stand up, please? So these are our members who are part of our group, and thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. And then would you be willing to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Ty Affleck. I'm a physician in the community and have had a bit to do with some of the concussion changes you did a few years ago.
Thank you.
I'm Nancy Chin. I'm an acquired brain injury specialist in the Disability Resources Department at Santa Rosa Junior College.
And I'm Monica Okubo. I'm the head athletic trainer at Santa Rosa Junior College and also an instructor in sports medicine. And I also help to, I guess, as a liaison, kind of supporter of the athletic trainers you guys approved hiring a few years ago.
Great, thank you. In September of 2017, the board asked the district to create a committee to look carefully at high school football using what the board called 2020 vision, to learn more about our programs, to look at trends across the country, and to consider what football might look like in our district in the year 2020. We invited representatives from coaches, administrators, teachers, athletic trainers, parents, PE teachers, the medical community, so there was a specific invitation that went out to about 23 targeted people, and then we also had a general invitation that went to the PE department chairs and athletic directors, and principals were asked to reach out to their communities for representation. And this, on this slide, this is a list of the people who attended at least one or more of the meetings. The committee came together for 4 meetings between November and May, and we also communicated through emails and Google Docs. And we came down to this what I think of as an essential question: how do we balance our responsibility to student health with the benefits of football? So we really looked carefully at these 2 aspects, the positives and the challenges. And some of these characteristics of football also exist in other sports, and they're worth noting. Coaches can be mentors to our players. Playing football and other sports teaches discipline and how to deal with adversity. Football in particular brings the community to the school and may set the tone for the school year. Football draws more boys than any other sport, and it provides a safe place for boys to express emotions. Playing sports can increase health and fitness, and students who play sports have to keep their grades up in order to play. Football also provides a financial benefit in that money from the gates is then available to other sports. It supports other teams at the school. And also football appeals to a wider range of students than other sports. It's more diversified, so it brings a broader demographic into the close quarters of the team. And one of our football players said, football is more than just a sport for me. It's a way to connect with my community and my peers. So then we also have to consider the challenges. Football has a high injury rate, and concussions and their consequences can affect a student's learning and their education. There are also other concerns regarding equipment costs being high, and also we're wondering if there is equity across our schools in equipment, resources, and fundraising. Football also can have a negative stereotype. And last, with participation rates, while the rates are decreasing, football remains the #1 sport across the nation for boys. Oops, hello. What? Hello, there we go. Oh, hi. Okay, there we go.
Rick's coming.
Oh, good. Thank you, Rick. Can you make it go back one? Oh. Perfect. Thank you. Excuse me. So our most pressing concern regarding football does have to do with concussions. And this is what our research shows that, and one thing that was really striking to me was that the research that says that football helmets don't prevent concussions. They can prevent skull fractures, but not concussions. And concussions, whoops, hi. What? So I just keep going. Okay, sorry about that. So concussions can occur without a blow to the head. It can also, someone may have a concussion even though they may not lose consciousness. Academic accommodations are also an integral part of concussion management, and the risk of re-injury is very high when a student is symptomatic. In order to reduce the risk of football, the California Interscholastic Federation, or CIF, has made changes to football play and practice rules. And those changes have been influenced by the National Federation of State High School Associations, or the NFHS, as well as changes made by other states. And some of those changes include, and this first one is a local change, the new alignment of the North Bay League. So the North Bay League is now, it consists of 12 12 schools, and those schools are divided into 2 divisions of 6 each, and the idea is that there will be a more competitive playing field, that a more powerhouse schools will be playing each other, so that it's a little more equal in terms of who's playing whom. There are other refinements related to the technique and practice times, as well as protocols such as Heads Up, which is a tackling protocol. So the return to play rules also affect the amount of time a student is away from play and away from school, and it affects recovery time, and that a student needs to have a doctor's note to return to play. So these are some of the rules that have been implemented in order to ensure that our students are protected. So the Heads Up protocol handout, the CIF return to play protocol, the CIF change regarding full contact, and a sample schedule for a week of football practice are in your packet, as well as the return to learn protocol. The major change that we instituted, and this was really from the beginning of our concussion management program, was the athlete concussion education that the athletic trainers provide. And they do that every year. Every time there's a concussion a concussion baseline testing event, the trainers provide that education. So the program development and collaboration are key factors to reducing the risk of concussions, and our athletic trainers are a vital component of that program. The student athlete, and you can see this in your slide, this is a really great diagram that shows the student athlete in the center, and then the athletic trainer is surrounding that student. And then all around there are the different members, members of the concussion management team, and those are coaches, parents, the health tech, the school nurse, school administration, our medical professionals. All these different people are working together to support the student. And that is a very important part of creating a safer environment for our students in all sports. It's not just in football, it's in all sports. But our athletic trainers communicate with all these people. So we really are so lucky to have our athletic trainers. They do an incredible service for our students in our schools. The athletic trainers are considered allied health professionals, and they engage in continuing education, such as the concussion summit that we had recently at the Santa Rosa Junior College, and that was organized by Dr. Chin and Dr. Akubo, and it was an opportunity for all of our athletic trainers to come together, as well as other athletic trainers from the community and the surrounding areas, and medical professionals came and presented information about concussion management, and Dr. Affleck presented, and also one of our athletic trainers, Matt Suramoto, who's here, also presented. So it was a really great time for us to gather together, gain some information, and also we were able to meet for, we had a time where we got together, the 5 athletic trainers, and Russ Petrick and I met and discussed any of the issues that might have been in existence in our program, any things that we needed to adjust or change or consider. So it was a very, very useful time, and I really appreciate the junior college and our colleagues there supporting this, thank you, this summit. And we hope to do it again next year. Thank you. Okay, great, thank you. So, when we, as our committee met, we discovered that there were things that we were doing well, such as our athletic trainers. We have athletic trainers at each of our high schools. Our concussion management plan is very good, and our baseline neurocognitive testing is good. But there are some things that we can do better, and like I said, when we had the summit and we met and talked, we realized that there was some communication in our return to learn protocol that needs to be tightened up that will improve our ability to protect our students. Our concussion education, we actually talked about improving that, updating it so it's a little more relevant to our students. And then we also need to continue to support our athletic trainers. Areas where we really need to focus more are equitable concussion management across the district, our annual review of our work in concussion management, and our equipment availability and proper techniques in fitting helmets and equipment. We want to make sure that that is being done properly at all of our school sites with all of our coaches. So the committee's findings are that we recommend that Santa Rosa City Schools continues football while keeping in focus ongoing science and research, monitoring best practices, and continuing to evaluate the sport on a yearly basis. And what we'd like to do is convene the Football 2020 committee again in the fall and evaluate football by really analyzing data, looking at the data that is important to our understanding of what needs to happen with football, and also to develop a criteria that we can use in the analysis of that football data, and also based on physical impact, science, research, and best practices. So that is our report, and our panel can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions from the board? Director Fong, then Director Sheffield, then followed by Director Carl.
Thank you so much for this, and I know we asked for this a little while ago, and I know you got put off, so thank you. Thank you to everybody on the committee who put in a lot of time on this and a lot of thought. When we're thinking about concussion, it seems to me that this looked like concussion protocol, working on that, and what kind of discussions took place on what happens in football, particularly football, that maybe it's in here and you didn't have it in the report, that would help to avoid a higher incidence of concussion.
What we talked about that would lead to fewer concussions?
Yes.
Do you know?
We talked a lot about the Heads Up football program, which is a program that's instituted nationally and the trainings are available, where you get taught coaches get instructed in proper hitting technique. More like a rugby tackling style technique that the head kind of stays away from it, and you get less of a risk of concussion with that style. So I think a couple coaches mentioned their schools might have participated, but that's where that line of being the same across the board, equitable concussion management across the board. So ensuring that we have our coaches trained the same and that they're actually, instituting that with their athletes and their teams. And also ensuring that equipment fitting is appropriate so that they have the right shoulder pads and the right helmet, so that, they maybe, their head isn't whiplashing back and forth with an improperly sized helmet and things like that.
And I would also add that we talked about concussion education and how that can be improved, because when student athletes are more informed about concussion and feel more comfortable reporting concussion, they are more likely to report sooner after they have that concussion, and therefore less likely to sustain another concussion. So the concussion education component, it's really just as important as the baseline testing that we're doing.
Thank you. And a follow-up I have is, if we're strapped in terms of budgets and principals, you can also answer this. If we're strapped in terms of budget for equipment, and we need the very best equipment to protect our players or athletes, how do we balance that? Are we giving them the very best equipment to protect them? And how do we do that?
Do you have a thought about that?
If you're looking in news reports and some of the other data out there, there are grades of football helmet that decrease some of the impact to the head better than others. No matter what you spend on a helmet, it does not prevent a concussion. So the emphasis shouldn't be on, should we buy the most expensive helmet? You do need to take into budget accounts on what you think is a level appropriate and dial that into your budget. But the place you're going to help with prevention of concussion is in education. It's in enforcing the rules that are changing with the game to make sure that people are modifying the way they play to avoid collision of the head. If you read the news today, the NFL just instituted a brand new change. Any offense or defensive player that impacts with head first will be ejected from the game. The rules are changing, and if we make sure we follow the changes to the game that are supposed to help prevention, make sure that education so that kids report their concussions early, because when they don't, it's that second impact that's really the devastating thing we're trying to prevent out there. We can't prevent all those initial concussions. We can prevent some, and that's education and rule change and reasonable equipment. But if we can prevent that second one, that's going to help prevent what happened at Cardinal Newman this last season. That's the one we really want to prevent, and that's where education comes in.
Director Sheffield.
I just have one question, and thank you for the presentation and the time that you have put on addressing the issue for meetings, and it sounds like it recommended to continue study into the fall. In numbers, are there greater incidences of concussions reported at games or at practices? Do we know that?
Matt, do you know the answer to that question?
The top of my head, I would say game.
Games. So I guess if we're going by that, I guess it might depend on the style that that the athletes, the students are learning. If they're learning at practice a style, the technique that now seems to be the norm, the approved safety technique. What happens when you go into a game? Does it all just go out the window because adrenaline? I say this because it was the same thing when I was in high school and I played, football and sports. The adrenaline, the emotions that went into it, the rivalries that happened, charged the students, and the style went out the window. We had a no hitting with the head rule when I was in high school. As soon as the game happened, every game there was a kid who was ejected. It never happened at practice, but it happened at the game. So maybe the second part of my question is, what does the concussion education component look like? Is this something that is done at the beginning of the season? The students, the athletes are given a talk about concussions and how serious of a risk it is and when to report, and then it's practice as usual? Is it an ongoing? One of the techniques that was used, as I recall, in high school was our first, I think it was 2 weeks of practice. We went out without pads. We just wore a helmet. You talked about the rugby tackling style. When you hit bone on bone, it really hurts. And you learn how to just wrap up. I mean, that's the fundamentals of the game. I guess I'm curious about what goes into the education part of it.
Well, the athletic trainers have very specific it's about a 45-minute presentation about concussions, about what happens to the brain, about the symptoms that occur, ways of preventing the concussions. And they have to, in order to play, they have to go through the education piece. They can't just do the impact baseline computer test and be like, okay, good, I'm good to go, I can play now. They have to do the education piece. So there's that. And then we have been trying to do more with presenting our information more to teachers, to counselors, to a variety of stakeholders. We did presentations. Dr. Chin did presentations to all our counselors. We went before school staffs and gave the presentation just to try to reiterate and remind all of our stakeholders about the concussion education. But with our students, there's probably more that we can do with that. I think we probably do need to do some kind of reminders. And I don't know what the coaches are saying, and we could ask Coach Harris, Pioneer High School football coach. Do you have anything you could add?
Sorry, Coach, don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
About, do you say anything to the student, to the athletes?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we tell them it's important that.
You want to come down?
This one. So yes, we do speak to them about the importance of their health and reporting to us any symptoms that they may have so that they can get it properly handled. I mean, it's pretty much out of our hands. I mean, if they have a symptom, it's boom, we send them right to the trainer.
And also our trainers are on hand for all the games and I think for all the practices.
Correct.
Yes. So our trainers are amazing. I mean, they're everywhere at all of our competitions and incredible when it comes to communicating with Dr. Affleck, for instance, or with other members of the medical profession. So that's been another important piece. Do you want to say something about that at all?
I was just going to say we're going to look at the concussion management or the concussion education this summer to see about changing it a little bit. It's just lecture, kind of regurgitating or, just speaking at them. And we're going to look at, Matt's going to head up changing it a little bit to add some pair share, some more realistic scenarios, like if you notice your teammate's just not right after a big hit, are you considered a snitch for bringing them to the coach or reporting to the athletic trainer and letting them kind of pair up and have a real discussion and then really addressing that and then following it up, obviously, reinforcing the points, that we've already gone over through the PowerPoint, but adding some more kind of more fun aspects to it and more realistic aspects to it.
I appreciate you bringing up your reflection about what it's like to be in a game and what's happening in terms of adrenaline, because we know from the research that although most student athletes today are educated about concussion, they know what it is, they know what the symptoms are, when they're in competition, they are operating on automatic pilot. And they are in the game and they are doing their job, and they're not thinking about the education necessarily that they got that day. And so we've done some recent research on the best way to provide concussion education, and our research has shown that having it be more actually involving the student athlete on the field with the coaches, having it be part of practice where they practice reporting to the coach. Kind of like, CPR. You don't just hear about CPR, you do it, right? This is the same thing. Student athletes are physical and they are used to reporting to their coaches. And so if we can incorporate that aspect, we might see also some changes in reporting behaviors. At the junior college, when we implemented this, we had an increase of almost twice as many concussions reported. and they reported in less time as a result, and particularly it was the male student athletes who were impacted by this approach. So I think this is something that with time and as we continue to evolve the program might have a positive impact on reporting of concussion.
So speaking to gameplay, when, I guess I'm thinking of it as a subtle way of asking, what happens, I guess the policy would be that a student who demonstrates like improper tackling technique is ejected from the game, correct? Is that the recommended policy? So if this athlete is a repeat offender, they're considered a danger to the sport. They're considered a danger. What happens to that athlete? Again, with understanding that he's on autopilot when he's in the game, he's thinking, you know, to do his job, but for some reason it just doesn't click. He cannot get it right. Is there a cutoff if he continues to do this in a game? 1, 2, 3 games go by, 1, 2, 3 missed tackles.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
My name is Albert.
Would you want to come down?
Come on down.
You need to come down. Thank you.
Okay.
A crowded table.
Hello, Director Sheffield. My name is Albert Tedgi. I'm the assistant principal at Carrillo. I'm also the administrator that oversees athletics. I work directly with the athletic director and all the coaches. So the question you just asked, I think if we had someone repping the officials, they could answer that, because if there is an unsafe or improper tackling technique displayed in the game, they're gonna either warn the student athlete first, or they'll penalize the team, possibly eject that student athlete. From the site level though, from the coach, the AD, and also the admin in my role, we will be working directly with the student and their parents. Sort of like with the progressive discipline system, we would take that same approach with the student and the parent. And it's not because we want to bust them or get them off the field, but we want them to play safe and play smart. Do all we can to intervene and educate to get them on the right path, but if they demonstrate they won't do that, then they'll be off the team.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Carl.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. First of all, thank you for the time that's been spent on this. We've been at this in this district for 6 or 8 years, and finally have gotten to a stage where we've got some great partnerships in the community with the JC, with the medical community, and North Coast Concussion Management, and a lot of people have been focused on this for some time, and I think that is to the benefit of the target audience, which is the student, and I think we have to keep vigilant about that. First, we just received some Santa Rosa City School concussion data from 17-18, which shows concussions received per sport. I'm curious where this data came from, and most specifically, what causes a number to be put in one of these that indicate, in fact, that a concussion was received.
So this data came from the athletic trainers, and they keep records of all the concussions and also all the other medical aspects of what's going on with a student, and they enter that into a program called Sportswear that is specifically for keeping track of all that data. And then, and what was the other question?
No, that's where it was interesting. Well, it was, you know, where did it come from? How was, and what was the definition to get a concussion in here? And I think you've answered that. Monica, do you have something else on that?
It's just, you know, there's an incident, and then they display symptoms, and then they're evaluated by the athletic trainer, and then they're not put back that same day before being, you know, seeing a medical doctor, right? So then they get put in the system.
What are we going to do with this data?
I'm sorry?
What are we going to do with this data?
With this data. Well, you know what, I asked Matt Suramoto to actually provide the data about that. I'm sorry that it's not part of the not everybody can see this, but the data regarding the practice days missed due to concussions. I thought that was pretty interesting data because for each concussion, a student missed a certain amount of practice, and he broke it out for me in very specific numbers. And so what I was looking at was how many total for all the football players who had concussions, how many days of practice were missed. And I think that data is very compelling. I would like to next year look at how many actual school days. Now this is practice days, and that doesn't mean it's the same as school days, but I think that would be important data for us to look at if a student is missing school days because of the concussions. I mean, 325 days of practice is a lot of days. And so this data in particular, I think is important. And, you know, we just, in terms of the concussions, we look at, you know, we track that and just keep, you know, we look at it, and then perhaps we'll use this next year when we're looking at what we need to figure out about how we move forward.
Yeah, I think you use the data for best practices, and I think the first thing you do is turn to your right and ask Coach Harris why he only has 1 concussion at Pioneer and there are 16 at Santa Rosa High School. What is Coach Harris doing that is, from a systemic standpoint, not being done elsewhere at other high schools? And this gets to some degree to Monica's point about having consistency of education at each of the schools. Now, it may be just lucky. Somehow I doubt it. I suspect that there's something to that because yours is so substantially lower than anybody else. And one high school is substantially higher than anybody else on almost every single sport. So those are the kinds of things from an administrative level I would want to be focusing in on and understanding, you know, where is the consistency and what kinds of things do we need to be doing so that we can get those kinds of numbers elsewhere. And that, I'm not suggesting that there's a reason for it, but when you get data like this, it jumps.
Sure.
And so you want to find out.
Well, and I just want to say that, and this I think was one of the things that we discovered by looking at this data, because it was so dramatically different. It's like, whoa, what, Pioneer versus this other school? You know, why is it so different? So, and one thought is that it could have to do with underreporting, that not necessarily are all the concussions being reported. So there are a lot of pieces to it that we need to look at. Were you going to say something about that?
Yeah, Elizabeth shared that with me a few days ago, and the first thing that jumped out was just the history of our concussions at Santa Rosa Junior College, and say in football, it went from somewhere like, you know, 1 a year 12 years ago to how many in football a year?
20.
It could be 20, 22, right? And so we have one team of anywhere. Last year it was only 60 people and we're getting 20 concussions, right? So the first thing I thought was, wow, we really have room for improvement and room to grow as a concussion management program, because that flat out with 3 levels of football is underreporting, right? And so from what I heard in the meeting, the football 2020 meetings, Pioneer's doing a great job with their coaching staff, but I think there are a few subjective components of it, you know, it just, I think the athletic trainer, okay, what's going on? Are you at football practices, or sometimes you have to leave, or, you know, just looking at the athletic trainer, looking at the education, looking at the coaching, you know, the coaching techniques, which are, you know, from what I've heard and seen, they're great over at Pioneer. But I look at it and I go, that's it's great that we're going to keep meeting and continuing to analyze the data, because I think that the group of athletic trainers, the group of coaches that, you know, are in Santa Rosa City Schools are willing to evolve and change and consistently improve. And I think that's where we can get some really kind of cool numbers next year to see if we've, you know, because for me, I think if you have an increase in reporting of concussions, that's a good thing. And there's the other component of then how do we also reduce the actual concussions, you know, because there's the actual number and then there's the reported number, right?
And I think it's also, when you talk about education, the first part of the report talked about education of coaches and students, and then in the end, when there's some discussion, it's coaches, students, and parents. And I think it's pretty critical, and I don't know what's done from the standpoint of parent education, and I don't know whether we need to actually suggest that any parent whose son in football or son or daughter in any other sport is going to have this education, that we require a parent to show up for something that relates to that. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I think it's important. It's one thing if my student is at school with something he or she really wants to do, goes through the education, I wonder whether the parent even hears about it. And it's important because the parent ought to be understanding what is it that I ought to look for in my student when they come home from a game, and get that education level as well. So I think anything we can consider doing to mandate some parent education as part of the requirement for students to participate in sports is probably worthwhile. Because the focus here is the student. We know that they're going to get concussions. The only way to eliminate that is to eliminate all sports. Some would suggest eliminate football would eliminate, 90% of the problem with respect to it. That's not happening anytime soon. Although, I don't know what's going to happen 20 years from now. I don't know what will exist when I've got a lot of Pop Warners talking about no tackling before 14. And I don't know, Ty, you tell me what's the difference between a brain from 0 to 14 and 14 to 18. It isn't, as I understand it, that brain isn't fully formed until in the early 20s. So, what are we doing, and what's the impact, and where's the cutoff line, and, and how much of this is our culture that we have to address and deal with? Those are bigger questions than you guys as a committee can take on right now, but important to look at. In terms of best practices, has the committee started looking at that? I noticed that you're saying that that's some of the next steps. Have we done any analysis of what other schools are doing outside of CIF at this stage?
Not in depth, no, we haven't.
Have we spent any time looking at any of the literature on CTE or trying to understand what?
Yes, we've got quite a bit of literature in our Google. We have a shared Google Doc with probably 25 articles and videos and lots of information about CTE, and we've talked extensively with our medical professionals at our meetings about what happens to the brain when it's inside this case and it starts shaking around, and what happens to it, because the brain is not a muscle, it's like jello. It's very vulnerable. So we've talked about that at length.
Has there been a discussion about some of the stats and literature that's coming out and talking about the impact or the ability to actually have sustained damage in CTE even younger than 18?
We didn't.
As opposed to what appears to be in the NFL, virtually every one of them will end up with CTE in some portion.
Well, we did talk about the Pop Warner and the impact of those early concussions, and Dr. Affleck can say something about that.
What is the state of medical research in that regard?
At the end of our committee session, the biggest conclusion we came to was that we are not immediately going to be changing football here. There's definitely a group out there, a group of physicians, a group of other folks who thinks we shouldn't even be playing that sport, at least at the way we're currently doing it. And the committee didn't feel like that big a statement saying we should no longer have football in our city schools was there. So we also didn't want to put all of the nightmarish data in here on the page that says problems with football. There's lots in the news. We figured most people are reading about CTE. It's a scary thing, and the bottom line is the younger a person gets concussed, the earlier onset that CTE may be, and the more severe it may be. And we're seeing it into kids playing at a very, very young age. And we know that people that don't even play at a college or NFL level, but played at an earlier level, are still susceptible to CTE. And the younger, the worse. The nice thing about a young brain, it tends to heal well. It may take longer to heal, but it does heal. But we didn't want to give you all this scary stuff, because our conclusion wasn't that we're going to change the sport right now, at least by stopping it, hopefully changing it with the education. The data you saw, the nice thing is we now have a baseline. Mm-hmm. And we know that we are underreporting. From everything we've seen, we know we're underreporting. And our goal with education is to enable the athlete to report his concussion, enable the athlete to report his buddy to get his concussion, and get these treated well so that we're not pushing these kids and having to miss more school, miss more classroom work, because that's what's really the issue here. And if we're successful with the education, we'll see the numbers change.
Yeah, and I think that's critical. I mean, taking that stigma away about reporting, and frankly, it's helpful that the media is on top of it, so they can see that when a member of the Warriors has a concussion, that they're out. That Brandon Belt has a concussion, that he's out. That Mac Williamson runs into the side and he's out. It starts to develop an understanding of the impact with respect to that. And I listened to Dr. Chen eloquently a couple of years ago talk about the increase of reporting and what a good thing that is. And the more that we can let the student athlete understand that, that's not going to end their ability to play, but that in fact this has significant ramifications, and that the whole world isn't going to crash in on them when that occurs, that in fact what it's going to do is it's going to be there to help them, and that's what our focus is, so that they're comfortable about it. Obviously that's important. So I agree with you. I think there is underreporting from everything that I've seen, and our goal is to figure out how to get that reported up, and I think that reporting greater, and I think that's why involvement of parents, standardizing of education, looking at best practices within our district, but probably even more importantly in other districts that perhaps are in front of us. My sense is, based on some reading that I've had, and what we're doing here, is we're probably ahead of 85% of the high school districts in the country. But that's because we've had a laser focus on this for 6 or 8 years, and we've been willing to spend the money on athletic trainers. We've been willing to spend the money on concussion testing. We need to up our game on education, and we need to broaden that and work on those best practices. I appreciate it. It's a good start. I'm sad that I won't see the impacts of the fall unless I decide to show up and say something at another meeting after December of next year. This has been pretty critical and important to me, and I appreciate the efforts and time that have been taken by a lot of people. This is kids that we're talking about who, in large cases, prior to 6 or 8 years ago, had no clue what they were doing to themselves. And frankly, a lot of us adults had absolutely no clue. And I think in our district we now do have a clue, and we've got some more work to do. Thanks.
And I think in summary, because I know you've worked very hard to make sure that all the athletes are participating safely, there are international best practices. So every 2 years, 3 years, experts from around the world gather, and they gathered in Berlin last year, and they come out with a statement, and then everybody reads the statement and then changes their program to these best practices. And I would say that, when we met at that concussion summit, all 5 athletic trainers were there. Elizabeth spent all day there. Russ Petrick was there all day. Santa Rosa JC, Sonoma State, and other area athletic trainers, and we went over the Matt Suramoto brilliant presentation, just reviewing for everybody inch by inch that best practices document that came out. If you Google it, you can just find the Berlin International Concussion Statement. And if you go through it, whether it's due to CIF rules or having an athletic trainer there to report to, or education, or all these components, they break it down. Santa Rosa City Schools, I would say, is pretty close to following most, wouldn't you say? Most, if not all, of those best practices to answer your best practices question. So I just didn't want to have you go without knowing that you made a difference, your voice was heard, and I think that it's great that Santa Rosa City Schools has made that change, and I don't think 85%, of other high schools in the nation could say that.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much for your work on this and for your great report. I think it's great that we are paying such close attention to this. The issue of concussions and safety in sports, not just football, but all of them. And I want to thank Director Carl for his work on this for the past 6 years or so. I think we've come a long way, and we have these great protocols, in large part because of his dedication to this issue and to the safety of our students in this regard. I really do like that we're looking at all the sports too. I know that I've had 2 pretty significant concussions in my life, and one was basketball and one was a cycling accident. And so neither of them football, but it so can happen to anyone, but it is serious. And I think that the one thing that we could continue to do better and better, as Director Carl says, education. So anyway, thank you very much for your work, and we'll see you again at your next report.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to F2, action item, 3rd interim report for fiscal year 2017-18.
We'll need a second to pull it up on the alternate computer.
We're waiting for Rick. We're waiting for Rick. Do you need some IT support, Rick? Because I know a guy. His name is Rick.
Good evening, President Close, Superintendent Kitamura, members of the board. Before we dive into the 3rd interim report, I wanted to speak briefly about the May revision. As we're aware, Governor Brown released his 2018-19 budget proposal in January, and every May he comes back with a revision. Lori will be handing out or if she hasn't already, a pamphlet that we received yesterday from School Services of California with some of the highlights of the May revision. As we communicated last week, it looked neutral to positive for us, and we still believe that there'll be some positive things for us through the May revision, and nothing that would change our initial assumptions negatively. Through that pamphlet and through discussions that we heard yesterday at the School Services California workshop, state revenues are higher than originally anticipated, both general fund revenues and projected per capita personal income. California is going through still an economic climb. Although everyone is wary about when the next recession may hit, we are almost to the point of the longest period of growth in modern California history at this point. So as with most things, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Through the revision, Prop 98 funding is increased just about $68 million, bringing the total to $78.4 billion that he is putting forth in his budget. There's also an increase in COLA from a 2.51 in the January budget to a 3% COLA adjustment, which also includes the LCFF increase of 0.29%, which brings an increase of LCFF funding to a total of $3.2 billion, an increase of $300 million over the January proposed budget. Another thing that's of good note is Governor Brown is attempting to fully fund the LCFF, and that will actually occur 2 years early than the original projections. We were at the 97% level this year, and next year the funding is expected to be at 100%. Through the May revision, there's also additional requirements for fiscal transparency for the expenditure of supplemental and concentration funds. The state is, or Governor Brown and their office are still coming up with what that would look like, but to make it more accessible to our stakeholders as well as the community at large and the state of California. There was modest increases to special education, not nearly enough to fund what we need to provide those services. There is also an increase in one-time discretionary funds that Joel talked about during the third interim report. And there was also continued support for CTE and a one-time investment in multi-tiered systems of support to improve school climate, a total of $15 million. So certainly not enough, but at least acknowledgement that that is a need for our school system. We're in the process, and we'll talk about this at the end of the presentation, of preparing the 18-19 budget, and when we bring it back for the public hearing on June 13th, we'll bring a more detailed report about the May revision and the at this point, the positive or neutral impacts to Santa Rosa City Schools moving forward. With that, we are at a point, because of the status of qualified with our second interim report, and Joel will get into this in more detail in a moment. We are presenting tonight highlights of the third interim report, which has to be submitted to the Sonoma County Office of Education by June 1. And with that, I'll let Mr. Dantos take over and explain where we're at with the third interim.
Thank you. For tonight's presentation, we'll touch on three highlighted areas. One is the financial reporting elements and the details that go into the report that include the revenues and expenditures and the known factors. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it seems to be on.
Okay, yeah, now here we go. Okay, let me start over. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, thank you. For tonight's presentation, we'll touch on three highlight areas. One is the financial reporting elements and the revenues and expenditure details that go into that, and the known factors and the assumptions made. And we'll also take a look at the multi-year projection, and we'll finish with next steps. Moving on to the financial reporting elements, again, our district, like all California school districts, are required to submit financial reports throughout the year. And as Rick mentioned, our second interim was submitted with a qualified certification, so we are required to perform this third interim due to the county office by June 1st. The third interim report is a condensed version of the first and second interim, and all the elements that are required for this report are included in the packet. Again, positive qualification is that we're able to meet our financial obligation for 3 years. Qualified is that we may not, and negative would be that we are not able to. So to start off with the general fund revenues, and again, this is an update as of the second interim, and perhaps the most significant item included in this third interim report is the governor's May revise, and we have included the majority of the items. The governor's May revise came out pretty much the same week that the report was finished, so we were able to include most of the items. There is one item that isn't included, and we'll touch on those, but everything will be thoroughly included. So the other item in this report, I think this is the significance is, the second interim report included a projection for our P2 ADA this year, and we did get our final P2 ADA report in, and it was higher than projected, and at second interim by about 25 students, by about 25 ADA. You know, the total ADA is a little over 14,000 ADA, so in terms of student ADA, that's not significant, but in terms of dollars, it is somewhat significant. And since we're funded off of current or prior year, you'll really see that revenue increase next year, because next year is when we'll be funded off prior year, because we are experiencing declining ADA. Then the other item is we continue to budget our insurance expenditures, and when we budget those insured expenditures, you'll see associated revenue increases for our projected claim revenue, insurance claims. And then we updated if you're looking at the revenue items, you'll see an increase in the revenues. And the final item I would say is impact, is we updated the CTE incentive grant. Now that's just based on current allocations and updating those revenues, and the expenditures in that area are updated as well. And then we continue to carry the key assumptions and revenues, the May revise and the 4.6 of one-time local of the fire damage, overall fire damage revenue, and the state revenue that is included in the governor's proposed budget 18-19, which Rick mentioned, which I'll get into again in another slide. So just touching back on the May revise and the ADA, these are the updated numbers that are included in the assumptions for this current third interim report. As you can see, I think the area to focus on this slide is the COLA. Rick mentioned this new May revise went from 2.5 to 3% in 18-19, and I think what was it, 2.57 from 2.4 to 2.57 19-20. And I mean, I have the exact amount of impact that is, but that's helps our revenues. And then the ADA again going up. So moving on to the expenditures, again, updating that CTE grant, just based on current year allocations, the expenditures there as well. We had some special education updates in this current third interim as we close out the year. And then just a reminder that the fiscal stabilization plan items are included in this report as well, and those will continue to be, those actual savings will continue to be updated throughout until the final budget is adopted. And then we're continuing carrying on the key assumptions in expenditures. We include the one-time instructional materials this year that don't carry forward, the insurance costs that don't carry forward next year, and we'll constantly update those insurance figures. And then we continue to include our cost of STRS and PERS and other increases. So finally, taking a look at the multi-year projection. So all the elements that are included in the assumptions and the board packet and the final result of this report is, if you recall, at second interim, we were projecting necessary future spending reductions in 19-20 of approximately $2.3 million. Now this updated financial report, due to the May revise and the ADA final P2 report, we're projecting a $1.837 million reduction in 19-20. Actually, so moving on to our reserves. Yeah, sorry, this is moving on to our reserves. So what does that mean? As you can see here, the end result, again, touching on that one-time money in 18-19, the governor's budget of one-time money in 18-19, you can see here the ending result in the reserves is we have our restricted ending fund balance, then our reserve for economic uncertainty, which is 3%, and then we carry that 18-19 one-time discretionary funds. And if we implement the cost reductions into 19-20 of the $1.8 million, we project meeting our 3% minimum reserve. And just to touch base on that one-time money in the governor's budget, at the time of this financial report when it was completed, the figure that I was using that was known was $295 per ADA. Now this is updated per the current ADA report, but since this report was finalized, there's been the official dartboard that the School Service of California comes out with, taking that state revenue and turning it into a $1 per ADA amount, and that updated $1 per ADA amount is now projected at $344 per ADA, and that will be updated in the budget proposal that's coming in June. And that's conclusion. Thank you.
So a couple of things on that, or one thing in particular, I want to speak to the ADA, the increase in that. Excuse me. We were reminded yesterday when we were at School Services of California that when we talk about assumptions and budgeting, that Ron Bennett would say the assumptions are absolutely wrong, but approximately right. And I think that holds merit here with some of the systems that have been put in place this year, and for us to accurately project within 20 to 25 students says a lot for fiscal services and what they've been able to do in terms of really aligning our needs of the budget with the needs of the school district in order to give a more accurate picture of where we're at any given time, and this will continue as we move on. Excuse me. So as we move forward, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be bringing back the initial budget for the public hearing on June 13th, and then bringing it back at the last board meeting in June for adoption. We'll also look forward to unaudited actuals coming back to the board in September of 2018 for review and approval. And lastly is the continuation of the Budget Advisory Committee. I think we've had several discussions here about how important that was, and continuing that moving forward as a viable committee to help the district as a whole on behalf of all stakeholders and constituents to make sure that we are good stewards of the money, budgeting appropriately, and taking care of our needed programs and students. I was able to hold my first Budget Advisory Committee about a week ago, laying out where we were at with this third interim report, as well as communicating the vision of that committee moving forward and how we're going to adjust timelines and ways that we can better provide information to that committee and to our groups as we move forward. Although the number has come down from what we originally anticipated of over 4 million to 2.4, now to 1.8, we still have a big responsibility to make sure that we're doing the right thing, looking at all programs and services, as well as how we're expending our money everywhere from maintenance and operations to the classroom, to make sure that we can be in a position where next year, as I explained to the Budget Advisory Committee, I hope we're not doing a third interim report, that we're in a position where we are at positive qualification, if not by P1, by P2 next year for sure. So that'll be our next steps moving forward, and Joel and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director Christoph.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. This is a subject that I've been interested in a long time, but I'm surely not an expert at it, but I continue to try and figure out ways to get better at it. A couple of things. First of all, I do appreciate that you put the history, like in the, on the report of all the stuff we've done, and we used to do that, and then we kind of stopped doing that. But it really is helpful for me as a board member to see those dates, to be able to go back and take a look if I have time and do that kind of stuff. Does our qualified status affect our bond sales at all?
There is concern because of it, but it hasn't affected it or affected our ratings. As everyone knows, we're going out for Series C and D and D and E for the high school and elementary school district respectively. Our bond rating stayed the same. There was in the elementary district, there was a note in there that they would watch our financial situation because of the qualified status, but it did not affect our rating, and we expect them to sell as normal.
Okay, we're projecting to be positive as starting next year, is that correct? First interim?
if not first interim, by second interim, but certainly next year,
Okay,
yes.
so next year. And then one of the things that struck me is on the slide with the projected ADA with almost 1,000 decrease in the next few years. It just doesn't seem correct to me when I see all the building going on the west side of town. I mean, there's a lot, and we're going to be having more. But, you know, we're convinced that this is going to be our ADA, the decline in ADA, then we're...
At this point in time, one thing even new homes don't do is provide school-age children necessarily. So when we go through the census coming up in 2020, as well as working with our demographer, we'll take into account those when they become completed and sold. But as of right now, we can't say that one guarantees the other.
Okay. And then the last thing is just, I think a comment that I've made before, but because we have been in such transition with, you know, our central office staff, that we haven't really, you know, that it hasn't been a part of what we've been doing for a while. But in the past, what really helped me as a teacher, a negotiator for the SRTA, for somebody that's interested in the budget, and very much so as a board member. Our new board members have not seen this. But we used to have a 5 to 7 page narrative that went along with the interim reports and the budget updates and so on, that really put your thinking into a concise, kind of thoughtful, organized way for us to reflect and develop questions. Your presentation is just fine, but sometimes it helps to have not just the numbers, but your best thinking that goes along with it. Now, I don't know if the other board members are interested in something like this. I'll be gone here very shortly. But as a private citizen, I would still like to see this as well. So it's just a thought that maybe we can discuss, or somebody might like to, to think about. But in the past, we've had that, and I know we haven't been able to do that recently, but it was very helpful. So thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Okay, Director Vaughn.
Thank you. So I think the reductions need to be now 1.8, is what you were saying?
That is correct.
What's the timeline then for figuring that out and bringing it to us?
Excuse me. Part of what I talked with the Budget Advisory Committee about was moving timelines up for next year, and that includes the budgeting process as well as the LCAP process, to get more input sooner rather than waiting until that January, February, March timeframe when it all kind of comes together. I talked about being able to provide recommendations to the superintendent at any point during the year rather than waiting for a point in time to deliver those. We're also aligning the Budget Advisory Committee with the major reporting that we have to do for next year, which wasn't necessarily so this year. So before unaudited actuals, before first interim, before second interim, and then talking about some other budgets along the way as well that aren't part of the general fund per se, but everything ultimately affects the general fund if we're having to supplement other programs or services that have their own budget. One that we're not doing, but as an example, would be food services that operates under their own budget. So we'll take a look at all of those, bring recommendations forward to Superintendent Kitamura to be shared or presented to the board throughout the year rather than waiting for one point in time.
Thank you, Director Carl.
Move approval of third interim.
Second.
Moved by Director Carl, second by Director Pugh. Roll call vote, please.
Director Carl? Director Pugh? Director Christoph?
Aye.
Director Fong?
Aye.
Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Sheffield?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Student Board Member?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, and thank you very much, guys. Bringing us back to F3, discussion item, LCAP preview.
Thanks, Rick. Great. Good evening, President Close, Superintendent Kitamura, members of the board. Tonight, we'll be bringing you a preview of the LCAP. With me, I have Steve Mazzara, Joel Dantos, and Sarah Crank.
Good evening. So one of the elements of the LCF funding is how do we determine the priorities as we spend these funds? And this actually comes from several committees and meetings held throughout the year as we gather feedback. We show our stakeholders data, reviewing programs already in action, and we aggregate those results of our surveys and make sure we've given everyone plenty of opportunities to weigh in on the process. So this happens at a district level, as you can see, through our committees, networks, and collaboratives. As I mentioned, it is a year-long process, and it is designed so that the voices we need to hear have the least amount of roadblocks impeding their input. The district advisory committee is made up of the principals and 2 parents from each of their sites. For the first time, we implemented a new concept with our DAC meetings this year, and we held them on a monthly basis. We also staggered the meeting times so that it was conducive to parents who work during the day or for others who had time commitments in the evenings. For instance, in January, the meeting was held during the lunch hour at noon, and then in February, the meeting was held in the evening at 6 p.m. Translation was always provided, and childcare was made available at all of these evening meetings. The Stakeholders Unity Network is comprised of our business partners, and we held 2 meetings in which we asked for their feedback as well. Our District English Learner Advisory Committee also meets on a monthly basis with Director Roma Flores to share their input on priorities of interest as well. And then finally, our last meeting was all 3 of these stakeholder groups, SUN, DAC, and DLAC, all coming together to review and provide feedback for all the data and actions of the LCAP draft we bring to you tonight. Steve Mazzara, will you please address the LMC part?
The LMC is just another stakeholder group that we added this year. There's a requirement under the LCFF law about consult with our unions, and we use the LMC process and our engagement already in there. And we had 2 meetings on that, and we were able to take, as of last Tuesday at our LMC meeting, some good feedback from that and have included those and suggestions as we go forward tonight.
The school sites, they are directly responsible for LCFF and Title I funds that we allocate specifically to their site for their SIPSA, their school plan for school achievement. The principals meet with their school site councils regularly. They review this local data. They have a comprehensive needs assessment for their site and then input to ensure that their SIPSAs continue to be aligned with our 2 LCAP district goals. The English Learner Advisory Committee at each site, their president is a member of that school site committee and provides feedback from ELAC regarding their initiatives of priority. Staff meetings are utilized to gather feedback and input, and at a district level, principals then share out their interim reports based on the needs and data from these sites. As you can see in your packet, you can see what was shared with all of our stakeholders, and one aspect of this was our thought exchange survey, which we did again this year. Went out to all parents, secondary students, and all employees of SRCS. Specific comments and feedback from this survey are in your packet, and they did help us answer the question. It was just a simple question: what are some things we're doing well, and what are some things we can improve, specifically entitled LCAP survey. It's a simple question, but when we aggregated all the thoughts shared during this process, there were clear themes of need that did emerge from that survey, and these are reflected in our LCAP additions that we will speak to on the next slide. The California Healthy Kids Survey also went out to 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th graders, as well as parents and staff at each site. This is actually the survey one of our guest speaker students was speaking about when he spoke about relationships. And this provides our district climate report, and that's an element that we have to look at as well. As a school board, you've heard us present interim reports, updates regarding the LCAP, and information of importance as it emerges. We are here tonight with a draft. The public hearing will be on the 13th, in which our stakeholders will have one more chance to give us their feedback, and then we will bring forth the final LCAP for your approval on June 27th.
So as Sarah talked about, we had input from many different places and many different people, and through the LCAP process, we are adding some additional services, counseling positions, also through our implementation of A through G for our 9th graders, bilingual aids, smaller class sizes in math, College and Career Center extended hours, EL specialist, additional tutoring after school, extended summer school offerings like Boost, and also other types of implementation for A through G support.
Another thing you'll see there is in this, again, this is a result of the LMC, is the greater transparency and explicitness. That came out as a direct conversation trying to understand further so that our unions can understand exactly where our spending is, how we're using it, what are the metrics involved, and be really more precise on as we dig down into the real day-to-day uses of the LCAP.
What's appreciated in your packet are these color sheets that reflect for both elementary and secondary the additions between and the subtractions between last year and this year. And I do want to give special credit to Joel Dantos for being such a great partner through this process. It's really nice to have somebody from the fiscal side this year. It's made a huge difference as far as how we're moving forward with the LCAP. Through the process, through the Budget Advisory Committee, obviously there was some ways to look at some of our budget solutions. I know that we spent some time looking at how we are spending money on our extra duty. Through the whole process, we are committed to the 35% reduction in consulting contracts. Moving our family engagement facilitators to title funding. As we talked about at previous meetings, moving some of the funding costs from base into LCAP, which you see reflected in these sheets, and also the elimination of the state and federal coordinator position. So as Coordinator Crane talked about, we will be bringing back for the public hearing on the 13th, and then final approval for the board on the 27th of June. And with that, I turn it back over to the board.
Thank you. Questions, Director Christoph?
Thank you guys very much. I don't want to take too much time, but just a couple of questions. You may have answered this. I was trying to listen as best I could. On the slide that is a kind of the snapshot of the dashboard, we have no information for chronic absenteeism. Why would that be?
Data is not reported at the state level this year, so this will be our year for baseline data. So that's statewide, that's not a Santa Rosa City Schools issue.
Okay. And then I can't help but make a comment about this. I mean, you know, blue is really good and red is not so good, and we had No Child Left Behind with all these things. I'm not sure. I get kind of a weird feeling about these different colors and circles and stuff like that, and it doesn't tell us a lot sometimes. And I don't know whether we as a board should have some discussion about this sometime, but I would be glad to anyway. But thank you.
Yes, Director Pugh requested we have a study session on the entire dashboard, SBAC, what it looks like, what the circle, I call them pies, what the pies mean, the red pies mean, the blue pies mean, and so we will be scheduling that for the board. I also want to say that if you can pull up the comparison. This document, if you haven't had a chance to take a deep look at it, is really, it's both for the elementary and the secondary. This is the one that Executive Director Dantos developed. It's comparing last year to this year to next year's expenditures with an explanation of why the difference. There's one for elementary, there's one for secondary. I do want to say through our consultation with the unions, what came up was if we could provide some examples under, for example, H104, it would really help explain in more detail what the actions were doing and what the expenditures were attached to. And so we think that that's a wonderful idea and that we want to move forward with that. Because the comment was, if we talk about LCAP all the time, meaning the unions and the union leadership and us, and we don't understand it, imagine what everybody else doesn't understand about it. And so we just want to make things more clear, more explicit, as Assistant Superintendent Mazzara said. So in your leisure, please take a look at these two documents because it really is a wonderful snapshot of our actions and the changes from year to year that we're going to perfect. And Joel has the dollar amounts in there as well, what we spent last year, what we're intending to spend for next year.
Director Fong.
Thank you. I will be sure to study that. It's very thorough and very explanatory. So this may or may not be in terms of what's going on with LCAP right now, but in light of the A to G and in light of our EL master plan, I'm wondering if this might be a time to ask to see if there are other ways outside of the box that we might be serving our EL students at the secondary level so they can access core classes, core college classes, and how we do that. I'm not sure it's in the LCAP, or are there different ways it could be put into LCAP? So what kind of other ideas could we research? So I guess that's a request.
Yeah, it's a good request, and I think we just received an email from Superintendent Kitamura about a road trip. Some districts in the Bay Area are really doing some different types of thinking about how they're serving their EL students, and so I definitely think we need to look at partnering districts outside the box ways of thinking. I think too, just looking at funding through different titles also is important, and I think part of what we've done in the LCAP 2 this year is really supporting some of the A through G and making that a priority, which will obviously be supportive to all of our students, and also the implementation of the EL master plan.
So we can expect.
Yeah, I would like staff to bring back what they learn on the road trip. Actually know the two schools that we're talking specifically are the International High School in Oakland, which we've had a trip there, but I'd like some other broader groups to go, as well as maybe some board members. And one of the places that I worked at before was Tennyson High School, where there is what they call the World House. Basically, I think what we need to look at is how do we use our resources in a more concentrated way for our EL students. Having bilingual academic A through G courses within that forum so that EL students can access college preparatory classes and college at a much faster rate than if all of the resources are spread out all over the district. So those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. I would suggest that and challenge my staff, let's do a design thinking model on it and bring that back to the board.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you very much for the really great work and report, and I really appreciate your continued efforts to get input from all stakeholders and be collaborative in this process.
Thank you.
Okay, F4, action item approving approval of amended board policy 6146.1, high school graduation requirements to include the specialist certificate.
Yes, thank you. We are bringing back board policy, as you said, to include the special certificate. I do, in all transparency, though, you are receiving a version that you don't have in your packet. Several counselors did contact Director Fletcher to talk about that the mathematic portion and the requirements of the 3 years was a little hazy, maybe not explicit enough. And so, therefore, working with some vice principals and counselors, Director Fletcher did do an additional red line around the mathematics to make it a little bit more explicit. So with that, we can either move forward or we can give it to the board to take time to look through the new language and bring it back on the 13th.
Director Carl.
That was one concern I have, is that we were approving by an action item an amendment to board policy, and I didn't quite understand. Normally we go through a first reading and a second reading, and I didn't know where we were. And given the fact that this is here, I don't have any comments to it. It seems to me we had a first reading and a second reading.
We went back and forth on this in terms of it being an already approved amendment, already approved policy with just the amendment. The second piece now added with the mathematics, my suggestion would be let's bring it back at the next meeting. There's no time rush on it, and so I'd rather have it done where you have time to look at it, and even the next meeting give comment to it if needed.
Yeah, I think given that it wasn't posted online with the agenda, ahead of time available to the public, that we should bring it back.
Okay, great.
I appreciate you bringing this to us tonight, this version. Are there any other questions or comments? So we'll have a chance to look at this and we'll bring it back next meeting for
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, just a clarification, so the two changes are adding language around the specialist certification, because that wasn't in the original policy, and the second is more defined language around mathematics language, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, F5, action item resolution designating positions for representative and alternate to the RESIG Joint Powers Board.
Thank you, President Close. I'm currently the district representative with the business services as alternate on the RESIG board, and after June 30th, we will need a new representative. So to move this forward, we need the board to take action on the recommendation that and it's not by position, not by person necessarily, but the assistant superintendent of business services would be the Santa Rosa City representative on the RESIG board, and the assistant sup of HR would be the alternate. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I'd like to move item F5.
Second.
Moved by Director Pugh, second by Director Carl. Roll call vote, please.
Director Pugh? Director Carl?
Aye.
Director Christoph?
Aye.
Director Fong? Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Sheffield? President Close?
Aye.
Student Board Member?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. F6, action item approval of applications for declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
This is an action item that happens on an annual basis. It must be in open session, and the board takes action on that. This allows us to apply for provisional permits and the ever popular STIPs and PIPs as needed next year for people who may be in intern programs or working on their credentials to fill the needs as necessary.
Questions, comments from the board? Director Christoph?
I have a question regarding, as we move into more specialized kind of needs for our district and specialized kind of services, not just with teachers, but with others as well, are we seeing an increase in this number of authorizations? Has there been an increase in the last few years?
We've had consistent need in the areas of special education and mathematics.
Okay.
Just because of the lack of candidates coming out of credential programs.
Okay, and bilingual,
bilingual teachers and educators in any subject area are always of high need, but oftentimes it's that in and of itself is not something that we get interns on. It's more subject specific around special education and math.
Okay, thank you. I'll move item F6.
I'll second.
Moved by Director Christoph, second by Director Fong. Roll call vote, please.
Director Christoph, aye.
Where'd she go?
Aye.
Her phone. I don't know which way it goes. Director.
Can you do it?
Yes, Director Sheffield?
Aye.
Director Anderson? Aye. Director Pugh?
Aye.
Director Carl?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye. Okay. Well done, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
F7, action item award bid for Hidden Valley Modular Classroom Building Addition Project.
This is to award the bid for Hidden Valley Modular Classroom Project. This is for the 3 portables that we're putting in to house the displaced students from Hidden Valley Satellite Elementary. Ridgeview Builders was a successful bidder with a sum of $515,000 for the installation of the portables.
Director Carl?
Thank goodness we had 3 bidders. 515, 700, and 1.7 million. Any understanding as to why there's that big a difference? Any concern about where we are from a bid of 515?
As I talked with Director Braff, the company that responded with the $1.7 million bid didn't fully understand the type of work that they were attempting to bid. Then that put them way out of line. They have been very successful with accurately bidding our HVAC and roofing projects, but we're not so with this one.
Move approval of F7.
Second.
Moved by Director Carl, second by Director Pugh. Roll call vote, please, Lori.
Director Carl? Director Pugh? Director Christoph?
Aye.
Director Fong? Aye. Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Sheffield?
Aye.
President Close?
Aye.
Student Board Member?
Oh, you forgot the student board member,
Student board member.
Both times.
F6.
F6.
Student Board Member
Abstain?
Luke Mott. Abstain. Got it.
All right. Last but not least, is this good? 8:30, huh? Okay.
Yeah, don't take credit for that.
Sorry. Got ahead of myself. Award bid for Santa Rosa High School re-roofing and HVAC project.
So this is for Santa Rosa High School Phase 1 of the roofing and HVAC project that will primarily touch the front main building and some of the buildings to the side of that. Matrix HG Inc. was the successful bidder at $5.3 million. We're bringing this forward for approval.
Director Carl.
So the company that bid $5.3 million was the company that bid $1.7 million on the last one, and you partially explained it, I guess, that they didn't know what they were doing on the other one. But given that there was another bid for $2.6 million that ended up being withdrawn because of a clerical error, was a clerical error worth $2.7 million, or should we be running this back out again?
Mike, do you want to, or Sean? Sean.
I need a microphone.
Let me help you.
Because we're talking about real money here.
Yeah.
During the evaluation of CWS's bid, we looked at all the numbers that they had in there, and they definitely were missing certain portions of the scope of work, which was a significant amount of money that was left out of their bid. So the clerical error was leaving out basically a lot of the lines in the line set for the HVAC portion of the scope of work.
And what was the value of what they left out?
I didn't get an exact number because they just said it was left out and due to the clerical error, but in our estimate, basically, they were significantly under our engineering budget, where Matrix was close in line for this time of year in the estimate that we were providing.
What was the engineering budget?
We were a little over $4 million basically for that during a regular season, and then with escalation due to the time of year that we're bidding it now, knowing that it was getting close to summer and having to provide additional overtime and everything else to make sure this project gets done on time, was right in line with where Matrix was at.
Did the engineer give us a revised budget based on those changes? Are those renewed assumptions?
Basically, we didn't, we just added the escalation that was going on there, which right now in the industry, you're seeing almost a 30% increase every month. So based off of our numbers that we were at back in January and adding that escalation that we're seeing across the state wide, that's where it came back in line to where you're right in line with basically where Matrix actually came in at their number.
Okay, I mean, you can understand the concern.
Yes, I do, and trust me, when we saw the number and the spread that came in there, we definitely looked at the bid very hard to be able to understand it. Started into the actual post-bid interview with CWS just to make sure that they understood the scope of work. They went back to the estimators and looked at everything, and we just wanted to make sure that once students come back to school was our main concern, and that they had all scope of work, because we didn't want to start this project and then come at the end of summer coming back to you going, by the way, they missed something, and that's why we're not able to open the school or have something available. So that is why we did a full evaluation through the entire process to make sure that it was complete and able to come to you and say that this scope of work will be able to provide what we need to get the school back and up over the summer.
Well, as a board member, you know, we're charged, or as a board, we're charged with spending the taxpayers' monies wisely. And when I see a company come in at 3 times what a bidder is on one project, and then come in and win a bid that is 2 times what the next person is, it raises questions. And I'm not sure I fully understand what was left out of the CWS in terms of a monetary amount. I've heard that it was a significant amount. But honestly, it doesn't give me a warm, fuzzy feeling that we really know what that number is. I appreciate the report indicates that as it relates to Matrix, we're going to spend some time trying to value engineer that, and I would encourage staff to be heavily involved in making that happen. We've got talented staff here, and there's a reason we have them here. Let's use it, because it seems to me that there's all the reason in the world for a layperson, and I consider myself a layperson relative to this, to say, Sue, there's a problem here. So let's be vigilant about that.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Director Christoph.
Thank you for the report. I have a story, and I know I've told this before. I got a lot of stories about my history with the district as a teacher, as a student, you know, et cetera. But Santa Rosa High School 10, 12 years ago had a new roof, sort of a new roof, new air conditioning, which was new to the main building. And I had just transferred there from Pioneer High School and into a room on the east side of the building, a small room that got very, very hot. And I was very pleased to see air conditioning in my ceiling. Well, it didn't work. And it didn't work for the whole first year I was in that room, and I knew the people who, you know, were overseeing this. I said, what's going on here? And they said, well, it was a faulty system. I said, well, why would you buy a system like this? And the answer was the lowest bid. And so anyway, they went to enforce the warranty, and this company was out of Texas, and lo and behold, the company was not there anymore. So the air conditioning sort of worked by the end of the second year. There was a lot of water damage in the roof, and there was a lot of leakage and so on. I don't know where the problem was finding the parts for this particular system. For me, the question has to do with enforcing warranties and making sure that we have people who are putting these things in place. How deep do we go into evaluating the company and the work that they do in terms of warranty, the reputation for fulfilling their, you know, their responsibilities? Because low bid sometimes is not going to get you the best project. So anyway, how do we enforce a warranty if something goes wrong with this roof again?
I'll go ahead and address that question. We have a statement of qualifications that the contractors have to fill out as part of the bid packet, and we go ahead and do our checking on them to make sure that they qualify not only financially, but through qualified past work. So as far as the warranty goes, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 20-year on the roofing, right? And it's gonna vary on your HVAC componentry, but the warranty will be monitored, and this district is well maintained for the next 20 years on any of these roofs and HVACs we're basically touching. There shouldn't be any concern with warranty, to be honest with you. Now, if a company does go belly up down the line, I mean, that is something we have to deal with, but all the companies we're dealing with right now, I don't foresee that happening, not with their financial statements that they have to provide.
It would seem to me that part of the price we're paying, which is a substantial price, is for that warranty. And we're saying that we're paying for a 20-year warranty, but there's no way to enforce that. I mean, maybe my legal friends can help me here. I'm not sure how you would do something like that, but I'm concerned just from my past experience.
I'm gonna let Sean address that, but there is a way to.
So what we actually do is we partner up with the manufacturers. So once the contractor's warranty is actually out, we wanna make sure that we have a reputable manufacturer that will back their product that's in there. And so as a contractor's warranty, as you're discussing on there, they were most likely, they came in town after about a year or so, it was hard to get them involved to be able to go on there. So we actually, on the roofing side, make sure that the contractor is gonna provide a 5-year warranty. And then on the HVAC side, the GC is required to cover a 1-year warranty with additional pieces and parts that go up to 2 years. And then the manufacturer actually has a reputation. So with the VRF system, we're going with, I believe it was Carrier on this one, who has a lot of history with VRF and actually does a lot across this district and the entire US, and actually show that they are very favorable for school districts to make sure that they come in if there's any issues to back that, even if it was items that were occurring during construction.
Thank you for answering those questions, and I appreciate Director Carl's questions. And it would be helpful, I think, when there are bids that are so different, when there's such a big disparity, if we had some explanation in the board packet ahead of time. I feel like that would answer a lot of questions ahead of time. Did you have another question?
No, I want to move approval of item F8 with a request that we have a value engineering fiscal report back at the meeting in July.
Second.
Moved by Director Carl, second by Director Christoph. Roll call vote, please.
Director Carl?
Aye.
Director Christoph? Director Fong? Director Pugh?
Aye.
Director Anderson?
Aye.
Director Sheffield? President Close?
Aye.
Student Board Member?
Aye.
Motion carries and meeting adjourned. Thank you. 8:41.